Most people remember Bruce Lee as a movie legend, but before the big screen, before Hollywood understood what it had, Bruce Lee quietly changed television forever with his fists, his philosophy, and a role that almost no one expected to matter. In the mid-1960s, the Green Hornet aired for just 2 seasons. On paper, it looked like another short-lived superhero show. In reality, it became the doorway through which Bruce Lee introduced real martial arts, real speed, and real presence to American audiences, often without them realizing it. And the strangest part, the most important man on the show wasn't even supposed to be the star. #10. Bruce Lee was hired for his skills, not his fame. When Bruce Lee was cast as Kato in the Green Hornet, he was not a household name in America. In fact, outside of a small circle of martial artists and television producers, almost no one knew who he was. He wasn't hired because of box office potential. He wasn't hired because of celebrity appeal. He was hired because no one else in Hollywood could physically do what he could do. At the time, television fight scenes were slow, theatrical, and carefully staged to look safe. Punches were wide, kicks were rare, and movement was deliberately exaggerated so cameras could follow along. Bruce Lee was the complete opposite. His movements were fast, precise, and brutally efficient. Producers quickly realized that if they filmed him at full speed, audiences would barely be able to see what he was doing. This created an unusual situation. Instead of asking Bruce Lee to slow down, the show often adjusted the camera work. Shots were framed tighter. Editing was altered. Some fight scenes were shortened because his techniques ended fights too quickly. In other words, the show had to adapt to Bruce Lee, not the other way around. What made this even more remarkable is that Bruce Lee was playing a sidekick. The Green Hornet was technically the hero. Kato was meant to be the loyal assistant. But every time Bruce Lee stepped into a fight scene, the balance shifted. Viewers may not have known his name, but they knew something was different. His movements didn't look like acting, they looked real. Behind the scenes, Bruce Lee treated the role as more than just a job. He used it as a testing ground. He experimented with timing, distance, and reaction speed. He refined the principles that would later define Jeet Kune Do. To him, the Green Hornet was a laboratory, not a limitation. Ironically, the very reason he was hired, his unmatched physical ability, also kept him from being fully recognized at the time. Television executives didn't yet understand how revolutionary he was. They saw him as an asset, not a phenomenon, but history would prove otherwise. #9. Kato quietly redefined the image of Asian men on American TV before the Green Hornet. Asian male characters on American television were usually portrayed in narrow, limiting ways. They were often servants, comic relief, or background figures with little authority or presence. Strength, confidence, and physical dominance were rarely associated with them on screen. Kato shattered that image without ever making a speech about it. He was calm, focused, and deadly efficient. He didn't brag, he didn't posture, he didn't overact. When danger appeared, Kato simply handled it. That quiet confidence became one of the most powerful aspects of the character. What made this even more impactful was the dynamic between Kato and the Green Hornet. In many episodes, Kato was clearly the more capable fighter. He drove the Black Beauty, he handled the technology. He ended fights before they escalated, yet he never tried to outshine his partner. His strength was shown through action, not dialogue. For American audiences in the 1960s, this was something entirely new. An Asian man portrayed as physically superior, emotionally controlled, and unquestionably competent was rare. And Bruce Lee didn't rely on stereotypes to achieve it. He didn't exaggerate an accent. He didn't play for laughs. He played Kato as a professional. Behind the camera, Bruce Lee was fully aware of what this representation meant. He had already faced repeated rejections in Hollywood because of his ethnicity. He understood that visibility mattered, even in a supporting role. Every scene became an opportunity to subtly challenge expectations. Interestingly, Many viewers remembered Kato more vividly than the Green Hornet himself. This wasn't planned, it happened organically. Bruce Lee's presence commanded attention in a way that scripts alone couldn't control. Years later, when martial arts films exploded in popularity, many American fans traced their first exposure back to Kato, even if they didn't realize it at the time. The seeds planted by the Green Hornet grew quietly, but powerfully. Bruce Lee didn't just play a character. He changed the visual language of strength on American television, and he did it without asking permission. Number 8. Bruce Lee was often asked to hold back his real ability. One of the most frustrating realities for Bruce Lee on the Green Hornet was that he was rarely allowed to fight at full capacity. Not because he lacked control, but because his movements were simply too fast for television at the time. Cameras couldn't track him properly, and stunt performers couldn't keep up with him safely. In many fight scenes, Bruce Lee was instructed to slow down. Sometimes he was told to repeat movements in a more exaggerated way so the audience could visually process what was happening. From a performer's standpoint, this went against everything he believed in. For Bruce Lee, efficiency was truth. If a movement worked, it didn't need embellishment. This created an internal conflict. On one hand, he was grateful for the opportunity. On the other hand, he knew viewers were seeing a diluted version of what he could actually do. The Kato audiences watched was impressive, but still restrained. Behind the scenes, Bruce Lee often demonstrated techniques at full speed to cast members and crew. These moments became legendary. People would stop what they were doing just to watch him move. Even seasoned stuntmen admitted they had never seen anything like it. His strikes stopped inches from their faces, yet carried enough force to make the air crack. What's important to understand is that Bruce Lee didn't express frustration by complaining. He adapted. He adjusted angles, timing, and positioning so that even slowed-down movements looked sharp and dangerous. He learned how to communicate power without excess motion. This limitation ended up shaping his screen presence in a unique way. Kato didn't need long fights. A few precise actions told the entire story. Viewers sensed that there was more beneath the surface, speed and power, and thus waiting to be unleashed. Ironically, this restraint made Bruce Lee even more intriguing. Audiences could feel that they were not seeing the whole picture. That sense of untapped potential stayed with viewers long after episodes ended. When Bruce Lee later exploded onto the big screen, many fans realized something unsettling. The man they thought they knew from television had been holding back the entire time. Number 7. The Green Hornet became Bruce Lee's unexpected global launchpad. Although the Green Hornet struggled in American ratings, its afterlife told a very different story. When the show was exported overseas, particularly to Asia, everything changed. In Hong Kong, the series was rebranded and marketed in a completely different way. Instead of focusing on the Green Hornet, promotional materials emphasized Kato. Bruce Lee was positioned not as a sidekick, but as the central attraction. Posters highlighted his image. Episodes were edited to showcase his fight scenes more prominently. In some markets, the show was even retitled to emphasize his character. The result was explosive. Audiences who had never seen an Asian man portrayed with such speed, confidence, and physical authority immediately connected with him. Bruce Lee wasn't just another television actor. He was something new, modern, intense, and authentic. This international reaction shocked American producers. The same show that struggled domestically was becoming a phenomenon abroad because of one actor they hadn't fully appreciated. Offers began to appear. Film studios in Hong Kong recognized what Hollywood had overlooked. Bruce Lee himself understood the significance instantly. He saw that television had given him visibility, but cinema would give him freedom. The Green Hornet had proven that audiences responded to him, even when he wasn't the lead. More importantly, it taught him a crucial lesson about control. He realized that if he wanted to fully express his philosophy, his speed, and his ideas about combat, he needed creative authority. He needed to shape the project, not just appear in it. That realization would guide every major decision, he made afterward. In hindsight, the Green Hornet wasn't a stepping stone by design, it became one by accident. A short-lived American TV show quietly introduced the world to a force it wasn't prepared for. Bruce Lee didn't just walk away from the Green Hornet. He carried its lessons with him and turned them into a global revolution. Number 6. Bruce Lee used Kato to introduce real martial arts philosophy. While most viewers saw Kato as a highly skilled fighter, Bruce Lee saw something deeper. To him, the character was a subtle vehicle for ideas that American television had never encountered before. Kato wasn't just throwing punches, he was quietly demonstrating a new way of thinking about combat. At the time, martial arts on screen were often portrayed as rigid systems. Fighters followed recognizable styles, fixed stances, and predictable movements. Bruce Lee rejected that approach completely. Through Kato, he began showing fluidity, adaptability, and efficiency, concepts that would later define his philosophy. Even in brief fight scenes, Kato rarely wasted motion. He didn't strike just to look impressive, every movement served a purpose. When he blocked, he countered immediately. When he advanced, he closed distance decisively. These details may have gone unnoticed by casual viewers, but trained eyes could see that something revolutionary was happening. Bruce Lee was essentially teaching without teaching. There were no explanations, no lectures, no slow-motion breakdowns. The philosophy was embedded in action. Kato responded to opponents based on what they gave him, not what a script demanded. This responsiveness was at the heart of Bruce Lee's thinking. Behind the scenes, Bruce Lee often discussed these ideas with cast members. He talked about freedom over form, simplicity over tradition, and truth over imitation. For him, the Green Hornet was not just entertainment. It was an opportunity to normalize realism in movement. This approach also influenced how Kato carried himself outside of fights. He was observant, restrained, and calm. He didn't rush into danger emotionally. He assessed situations, then acted with precision. That mindset mirrored Bruce Lee's belief that combat began long before the first strike. In retrospect, Kato was one of the earliest mainstream representations of Bruce Lee's philosophy in motion. Long before audiences heard the famous quotes, they were already watching the ideas play out, episode after episode, quietly reshaping expectations. Number 5. The show accidentally revealed Hollywood's creative limits. One of the most telling aspects of the Green Hornet was not what it did right, but what it struggled to handle. Bruce Lee's presence exposed the limitations of Hollywood's creative system at the time, especially when it came to innovation and control. Despite recognizing his talent, producers rarely allowed Bruce Lee input on story direction. Fight scenes were planned according to traditional television formulas. Character dynamics were rigid. The structure left little room for experimentation. Bruce Lee often felt constrained by a system that valued familiarity over evolution. This frustration wasn't rooted in ego. It was rooted in vision. Bruce Lee could see what martial arts on screen could become, but the industry wasn't ready to follow him there. Television schedules were tight. Budgets were limited. Risk was avoided. As a result, Kato remained a supporting character, no matter how strongly he resonated with audiences. The idea of centering a show around someone like Bruce Lee was considered too radical at the time, not because of lack of talent, but because of fear of the unknown. Ironically, this limitation sharpened Bruce Lee's understanding of creative ownership. He realized that waiting for permission would never lead to meaningful change. If he wanted to redefine action cinema, he would have to do it on his own terms. This realization became a turning point. The Green Hornet showed him both what was possible and what was impossible within the existing system. It gave him exposure, but also clarity. He now knew exactly what he needed to build next, and what he needed to leave behind. Many years later, critics would look back and see the Green Hornet as a missed opportunity for Hollywood. They had a revolutionary figure in their hands, yet treated him as a supporting element rather than a driving force. For Bruce Lee, however, the experience wasn't a failure. It was a blueprint, one that showed him the boundaries, so he could break them. Number for Bruce Lee's physical presence change, how action was shot on television. One of the quiet revolutions sparked by Bruce Lee on the Green Hornet had nothing to do with dialogue or storylines. It was visual. His physical presence forced directors, cinematographers, and editors to rethink how action scenes were filmed for television. Before Bruce Lee, most TV action followed a predictable rhythm. Wide shots showed bodies moving slowly across the frame. Cuts were minimal, camera movement was conservative. This style worked because performers moved at a pace the camera could comfortably capture. Bruce Lee disrupted that balance immediately. His speed compressed time. A punch that took others a full second happened in a fraction of that. A kick that normally required setup appeared instantly. When filmed traditionally, his movements blurred. Instead of slowing him down completely, production teams began experimenting. Cameras moved closer, shots tightened, angles became more aggressive, editors cut faster. Reaction shots were used to sell impact. These techniques, now common in modern action editing, were rare on television in the mid-1960s. Bruce Lee didn't demand these changes. His body demanded them. Even when Kato stood still, he radiated readiness. Shoulders relaxed but alert, eyes constantly scanning, weight balanced. This physical awareness translated through the screen and gave scenes tension even before a fight began. Directors learned that they didn't need long brawls when Bruce Lee was involved. A few seconds of precise movement communicated dominance more effectively than minutes of choreographed struggle. Action became sharper, more purposeful. This shift had a ripple effect. Crew members who worked on the Green Hornet carried these lessons into other projects. Younger filmmakers took note. The idea that action could be fast, tight, and efficient slowly entered the television vocabulary. What's remarkable is that this transformation happened almost accidentally. The show didn't set out to innovate. It simply tried to keep up with one man's physical reality. Bruce Lee once said that the body expresses truth more honestly than words. On the Green Hornet, his body forced an entire medium to evolve, even if it didn't fully realize it at the time. Number 3. Kato's silence was one of his greatest strengths. Kato was not a talkative character. Compared to other television sidekicks of the era, he spoke relatively little, but this wasn't a weakness. It was a deliberate and powerful choice, one that aligned perfectly with Bruce Lee's philosophy. In many scenes, Kato communicated through posture, timing, and restraint rather than dialogue. He listened more than he spoke. He observed before acting. When he did speak, it was concise and purposeful. This silence gave the character gravity. He didn't need witty lines or dramatic monologues to command attention. His presence alone carried weight. Viewers sensed that Kato always knew more than he said. Bruce Lee understood the power of understatement. In martial arts, unnecessary movement wastes energy. In storytelling, unnecessary words dilute impact. Kato embodied both principles. This approach also contrasted sharply with typical television portrayals. Sidekicks were often chatty, comedic, or reactive. Kato was calm, composed, and proactive. He didn't wait to be told what to do, he anticipated. That anticipation made him feel dangerous in the best way. Enemies underestimated him because he didn't announce himself. By the time they realized the threat, it was already over. Behind the scenes, Bruce Lee pushed for this interpretation. He believed that true confidence didn't need to explain itself. Strength spoke through action. This quiet intensity influenced how audiences perceived him. People leaned in when Kato was on screen. They watched more closely. Silence became suspense. Years later, many of Bruce Lee's most famous film characters would carry this same trait. Few words, clear intent, absolute presence. In the Green Hornet, that template was already forming. Kato wasn't just a sidekick. He was a blueprint for a new kind of screen warrior, one defined not by noise, but by control. Number 2. The Green Hornet was the last time Bruce Lee accepted being second. By the time the Green Hornet ended in 1967, Bruce Lee had reached a quiet but irreversible conclusion. He would never again allow himself to be placed in a position where his vision was limited by someone else's imagination. Up to that point, Bruce Lee had played supporting roles, guest appearances, and side characters. He had proven his skill repeatedly. He had shown discipline, professionalism, and creativity. Yet the industry continued to see him as an addition rather than a centerpiece. Kato changed that, not because the role was large, but because the response was undeniable. Viewers remembered him. Overseas audiences demanded more of him. Industry insiders recognized that something rare had passed through their hands. Bruce Lee understood that staying in the same system would mean repeating the same cycle. More restraint, more compromises, more unrealized potential. The Green Hornet had given him exposure, but it had also revealed a ceiling, and Bruce Lee had no intention of living beneath it. This wasn't a rebellious decision, it was a strategic one. He began turning down roles that didn't align with his direction. He focused on developing his own projects. He refined his philosophy, not just of martial arts, but of identity and authorship. He wanted to tell stories where movement, philosophy, and character were unified. In hindsight, the Green Hornet marked the end of Bruce Lee's apprenticeship in Hollywood. Everything after that would be built on autonomy. He would no longer wait to be understood, he would define himself. When audiences later watched his films, they weren't seeing a sudden transformation. They were seeing the full release of something that had been contained for years. Kato was the last time Bruce Lee stood in someone else's shadow, and the moment he decided to cast his own. #1 Kato was the prototype for every Bruce Lee legend that followed. Looking back now, it becomes clear that Kato was not an early, incomplete version of Bruce Lee's screen persona. He was the foundation. Every iconic trait people associate with Bruce Lee today appeared first in the Green Hornet. The economy of motion, the explosive speed, the calm exterior masking absolute control, the refusal to waste energy, physical or emotional. Even the philosophy was already there, woven subtly into the character. Kato adapted instantly. He didn't rely on fixed patterns. He responded to reality as it unfolded. That adaptability would later become the core of Bruce Lee's teachings. What changed in later films wasn't the essence, it was the freedom. When Bruce Lee gained creative control, he didn't invent something new. He amplified what already existed. The difference was scale, clarity, and intention. That's why the Green Hornet feels so important in retrospect. It wasn't a detour, it was the blueprint. Kato showed the world what Bruce Lee could do when constrained. His films showed what happened when those constraints disappeared. And perhaps most importantly, Kato introduced a new standard of authenticity. Viewers could sense that Bruce Lee wasn't performing a fantasy. He was expressing a truth. His body moved the way it did, because that was how he believed movement should work. That authenticity is why his influence never faded. Trends change, styles evolve, but truth endures. More than half a century later, the Green Hornet still stands as the quiet origin point of a global legend. Not because it was perfect, but because it revealed something real. Bruce Lee didn't become a legend overnight. He became one the moment the world finally caught up to what Kato had been showing all along. If you like this video, don't forget to like and share it to help more people discover the hidden stories behind classic television and martial arts history. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into iconic films and legendary figures like Bruce Lee. Hit join to become a channel member and unlock exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and extended stories you won't find anywhere else. And if you'd like to directly support the channel, use thanks below the video. Every contribution helps us keep telling these stories the right way. See you in the next deep dive.